What would you do if someone tried to steal from the very person trained to protect a palace? Today's story shows how a group of thieves learned the hard way that targeting a royal guard was the biggest mistake of their lives. Make sure you watch until the end to see how justice gets served in the most unexpected way. Before we dive into this incredible story, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. You won't want to miss our daily dose of real-life karma and justice served. Now let's begin. The morning sun cast long shadows across St. George's Square as Nathan Miller adjusted his ceremonial uniform, standing guard at Windsor Palace's Eastern Gate. His polished buttons gleamed in the early light, reflecting the pride he took in his position as a member of the elite Royal Guard unit. At 28, Nathan had already earned a reputation among his fellow guards for his unwavering attention to detail. Every morning he would arrive an hour early to prepare his uniform, ensuring each brass button and medal told its own story of dedication and service. Today was no different, except for the peculiar tension hanging in the air. Tourists gathered in growing numbers, their cameras clicking and whirring as they captured images of the legendary Royal Guards. Nathan maintained his stoic expression, eyes forward, posture perfect, exactly as protocol demanded. 6 years of service had taught him that the slightest movement could trigger a flood of attention from eager visitors. "Looking sharp as always, Miller," Rachel Chen, his fellow guard, whispered as she passed during the morning rotation. Nathan's expression didn't change, but internally he appreciated the camaraderie. Rachel had been his training partner when they first joined the unit, and they developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's movements. Captain William Burke's voice crackled over their discreet earpieces. "Alert for all stations. Intelligence reports potential security concerns today. Stay vigilant." Nathan's muscles tensed slightly, though his exterior remained unchanged. After years of service, he'd learned to read between the lines of such warnings. The morning progressed as tourists flowed through the square, many pausing to pose near Nathan's post. Children waved, trying to make him smile, while their parents snapped photos. Yet something felt off. Nathan's military training had honed his instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. From his peripheral vision, he noticed a group of 4 men lingering near the Eastern Gate. Unlike the typical tourists, they weren't taking photos or consulting guidebooks. Instead, they seemed to be studying the guards' rotations, their movements too deliberate to be casual observation. The tallest among them, a red-haired man Nathan would later know as Marcus "Red" Thompson, kept touching something in his jacket pocket. His companions, Danny Cooper, Jake Sullivan, and Chris Walker, maintained a loose formation that any trained security professional would recognize as tactical positioning. Senior guard Michael Stewart, passing by on his patrol, gave Nathan an almost imperceptible nod. He'd noticed them too. This wasn't the usual crowd of curious tourists or excited visitors. These men were watching, waiting, and planning something. Nathan's mind raced through his training. Protocol demanded he maintain his position unless directly threatened, yet every instinct told him these men posed a real danger to the palace's security. He could feel their eyes on him, studying his uniform, his stance, and most concerningly, the ceremonial sword at his side, a symbol of authority that some might mistake for mere decoration. Little did these men know that beneath the ceremonial exterior, every royal guard was a highly trained security professional. Nathan's uniform might look ornamental, but his skills were anything but decorative. Years of advanced combat training, tactical awareness, and security protocols had prepared him for moments exactly like this. As the morning sun climbed higher, Nathan maintained his post, all while keeping mental notes of the suspicious group's movements. They had circled the square 3 times now, each pass bringing them slightly closer to his position. Whatever they were planning, Nathan knew it would happen soon. Captain Burke's words from their morning briefing echoed in his mind. Remember, we're not just guards. We're the first and last line of defense for one of the nation's most important institutions. Stay alert. Stay ready. The tension in St. George's Square thickened as midday approached. Nathan Miller's instincts had never failed him before, and right now they were telling him that trouble was imminent. The four men who had been circling the square had finally settled into position, spreading out in a way that raised every red flag in Nathan's tactical training. Marcus "Red" Thompson, the tall redhead who seemed to be their leader, had positioned himself directly across from Nathan's post. His eyes kept darting between Nathan's ceremonial sword and the palace entrance, calculating something that couldn't be good. His three companions had taken up positions that created a loose triangle formation around Nathan's post, cutting off potential escape routes. Rachel Chen, passing by on her patrol route, sensed the mounting tension. She slowed her pace slightly, her trained eyes scanning the situation. Through their earpieces, she whispered, "Nathan, something's off with those four. They're positioned for trouble." Nathan wanted to respond, but protocol demanded silence unless absolutely necessary. Instead, he gave an almost imperceptible nod, knowing Rachel would understand. They'd trained together long enough to read each other's smallest signals. The summer heat bore down on the square as tourists continued their photos and tours, completely oblivious to the dangerous game unfolding before them. A group of school children passed by, their excitement at seeing a royal guard momentarily drawing Nathan's attention. That's when Red Thompson made his move. It happened with frightening speed. Thompson approached Nathan's post, pretending to pose for a photo. His companion, Danny Cooper, raised a camera, acting like any other tourist. But Nathan saw Thompson's hand slip inside his jacket, and years of training set off immediate alarms in his mind. "Excuse me, guard," Thompson sneered, stepping closer. Then protocol allowed. "Mind if I have a closer look at that fancy sword of yours?" Nathan remained motionless, following protocol despite every instinct screaming at him to react. That's when Thompson made his fatal mistake. In a flash of movement, he reached for Nathan's ceremonial sword, clearly intending to snatch it and run. What happened next would later become legend among the palace guards. Nathan, without breaking his stance, caught Thompson's wrist in a grip of steel. The move was so smooth, so practiced, that tourists initially thought it was part of some ceremonial display. "Bad idea," Nathan said, his voice low and controlled. The shock on Thompson's face would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. Cooper dropped his camera act and lunged forward, but Rachel Chen was already moving. She intercepted him with practiced efficiency, her own training turning his momentum against him. Cooper hit the cobblestones with a grunt that drew gasps from nearby tourists. Jake Sullivan and Chris Walker, seeing their plan unravel, tried to create a diversion. Sullivan pulled out what appeared to be a smoke canister, but before he could activate it, senior guard Michael Stewart and two other guards had already moved to contain the situation. "Palace security!" Captain William Burke's voice boomed across the square. "Everyone stay calm and clear the area." Tourists scattered, many still snapping photos and videos of the unfolding drama. Thompson struggled in Nathan's grip, his face reddening with both effort and embarrassment. "Let go, you ceremonial puppet!" he spat, trying to twist free. Nathan's voice remained steady, his grip unwavering. "The Queen's Guard is anything but ceremonial, sir. I suggest you stop resisting." Rachel had Cooper pinned, her training evident in how easily she controlled his attempts to break free. "Did you really think we were just decorative?" she asked, her tone almost pitying. "Years of military training, and you thought we were just here to look pretty?" Sullivan and Walker found themselves surrounded by palace security, their half-baked escape plans completely neutralized. Captain Burke approached, his expression stern as he surveyed the scene. "Well, gentlemen, you've just earned yourselves a very special tour of our security facilities." As palace security began processing the would-be thieves, Nathan maintained his post, his composure never wavering. Tourists who had witnessed the incident were already sharing their videos online, spreading the story of how a group of thieves learned the hard way that royal guards were far more than ceremonial figures. Security footage would later reveal that Thompson's group had been planning this theft for weeks. They had studied the guards' rotations, thinking they had found a pattern they could exploit. What they hadn't counted on was the extensive training. Every royal guard underwent training that went far beyond the ceremonial duties tourists usually saw. Captain Burke approached Nathan's post, speaking quietly. "Excellent work, Miller. Clean, efficient, by the book. Though I suspect our friends didn't expect the book to be quite so comprehensive."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Nathan allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile, still maintaining his proper stance. "Thank you, sir. Just following our training." Rachel, having handed Cooper over to palace security, resumed her patrol route. As she passed Nathan's post, she whispered, "Not bad for a ceremonial puppet, eh?" The incident had lasted less than 5 minutes, but its impact would resonate much longer. Already, tourists were sharing their stories of how they witnessed a royal guard transform from a stoic figure to a highly trained professional and back again, never once breaking protocol more than absolutely necessary. As the square returned to normal, Nathan reflected on the morning's events. The weight of his ceremonial sword felt different now, knowing how close it had come to being stolen. But more than that, he felt a deep satisfaction in showing these would-be thieves that the Queen's Guard was far more than just a tourist attraction. Security cameras had captured every moment of the attempted theft, from Thompson's approach to the swift response of the guards. The footage would later be used in training sessions, showing future guards how to maintain protocol while dealing with direct threats. Captain Burke's voice came through their earpieces once more. "All posts, situation contained. Maintain standard protocol. Well done, everyone." The pride in his voice was evident, even through the discreet communication system. As the sun continued its journey across the sky, Nathan stood at his post, every inch the perfect royal guard. To passing tourists he appeared unchanged, the very image of ceremonial precision. But now there was a new respect in the way people looked at him, a deeper understanding that beneath the ceremonial uniform beat the heart of a highly trained professional. The attempted theft had failed spectacularly, but it had succeeded in reminding everyone that the Queen's Guard was not to be underestimated. As Rachel had said, they weren't just there to look pretty. They were the elite guardians of a royal tradition, ready at any moment to prove that their skills went far beyond ceremonial drill. Evening descended over Windsor Palace as Nathan Miller finally ended his shift. The attempted theft had set off a chain of events that would test not only his training, but his understanding of duty itself. In the guard quarters, Captain William Burke called an emergency meeting to address the situation. The room buzzed with tension as Nathan and Rachel Chen sat among their fellow guards. Security footage of the incident played on a large screen, showing every detail of Thompson's failed attempt to steal the ceremonial sword. Nathan watched himself on screen, noting how his training had kicked in automatically without a moment's hesitation. Captain Burke stood before them, his expression grave. What we witnessed today was more than just a simple theft attempt. Our intelligence suggests these men are part of a larger organization targeting military and ceremonial artifacts across Europe. Miller, Chen, your actions today may have inadvertently unveiled something much bigger than we initially thought. Nathan, felt a weight settle in his chest as Burke continued. The captain pulled up several photographs on the screen, showing similar incidents at other historical sites. These men have been methodically targeting ceremonial guards across multiple countries. They're well-funded, well-organized, and clearly thought we would be easy targets. Rachel leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the images. Sir, these look like professional jobs. Why target ceremonial items? There must be more valuable things to steal. Burke nodded, pulling up another file. That's where this gets interesting. We've identified Marcus Thompson, our red-headed friend, in connection with at least 3 other attempted thefts. Each time, they targeted items with significant military history. We believe they're working for a private collector with a very specific interest. Nathan's mind raced back to the morning's events, analyzing every detail with new understanding. They weren't just opportunistic thieves, he said, speaking his thoughts aloud. They studied our rotations, our protocols. They knew exactly when and where to strike. Precisely, Burke confirmed. And that's what concerns us. Someone has been watching our routines closely enough to identify patterns. This isn't just about one attempted theft. It's about the security of the entire palace. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Nathan felt a growing conflict within himself. His training emphasized maintaining ceremonial dignity at all times. Yet now he wondered if that very adherence to tradition might make them vulnerable. Should they adapt their routines, change their protocols? The very things that made the Royal Guard iconic might also make them predictable. Senior Guard Michael Stewart spoke up, his voice carrying years of experience. We can't abandon tradition entirely. It's what we stand for. But perhaps we need to find a balance between ceremony and security. Nathan found himself nodding. The ceremonial sword at his side represented centuries of tradition, but it was also a symbol of active duty and protection. Today had proven that these responsibilities weren't mutually exclusive. They could maintain their ceremonial presence while being ready for action at any moment. Captain Burke pulled up Thompson's criminal record. Our friends are currently enjoying the hospitality of the Palace Detention Center. Initial interrogation suggests they were paid handsomely for this job. The question is, by whom? Rachel's voice cut through the tension. Sir, if they're part of a larger organization, won't they try again? Maybe not here, but somewhere else? That's exactly what we're worried about, Burke replied, which is why we're implementing new security measures immediately. Miller, Chen, you two demonstrated exactly the kind of awareness and response we need. You'll be leading training sessions for the other guards on close quarters combat while maintaining ceremonial bearing. Nathan felt a mix of pride and concern. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him as he realized their role was evolving. They needed to be more than just guardians of tradition. They had to be ready for an enemy that saw that very tradition as a weakness to exploit. The meeting continued late into the evening as they discussed new protocols and security measures. Nathan's mind kept returning to Thompson's face, to the moment the thief realized his mistake. There had been something in his eyes beyond mere surprise, something that suggested he'd underestimated not just the guards' abilities, but their entire purpose. After the meeting, Rachel caught up with Nathan in the corridor. Quite a day, huh? From ceremonial guards to uncovering an international crime ring. Not bad for a Thursday. Nathan managed a small smile. Makes you wonder what they'll try next. We can't change who we are or what we represent, but we need to be ready. That's just it, Rachel replied, her expression thoughtful. Maybe we don't need to change who we are. Today proved that we can be both ceremonial guards and active protectors. The tourists got quite a show, but more importantly, we sent a message to anyone else thinking of trying something similar. As they walked through the palace grounds, Nathan observed the evening guard change with new eyes. Each precise movement, each perfectly timed step now seemed to carry additional meaning. These weren't just ceremonies, they were demonstrations of discipline, training, and readiness. Captain Burke's voice echoed in his mind. You are the visible representation of our security forces. The ceremony is part of the job, but it's not the whole job. Never forget that. The night shift was taking their positions as Nathan prepared to leave. He paused to watch them, noting how their ceremonial precision masked their combat readiness. It was a balance they'd maintained for generations, but now that balance faced new challenges. Tomorrow would bring new protocols, new training sessions, and possibly new attempts by those who thought the Royal Guard was nothing more than a tourist attraction. But they would be ready. Today had proven that tradition and security could work hand in hand. That ceremony didn't preclude combat effectiveness. As Nathan finally headed home, the weight of his ceremonial sword reminded him of everything it represented. Not just centuries of tradition, but the very real responsibility of protecting one of the nation's most important institutions. They might be targets now, but they would show anyone who tried that targeting the Royal Guard was a serious mistake. Dawn broke over Windsor Palace as Nathan Miller prepared for another day of duty. The events of yesterday still weighed heavily on his mind, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. As he adjusted his uniform in the guard quarters, Rachel Chen burst through the door, her face tense with urgency. Nathan, you need to see this, she said, holding up her phone. Thompson and his crew escaped during transport to the central holding facility. They overpowered 2 officers and vanished into the city. Nathan's blood ran cold. He'd known these weren't ordinary thieves, but this level of organization suggested something far more sinister. Captain Burke called an immediate emergency briefing, gathering all available guards in the security office. This is no longer just about protecting ceremonial items, Burke announced, his voice grave. These men have proven themselves both dangerous and resourceful. We have reason to believe they'll attempt to finish what they started, possibly with reinforcements. Security footage from the escape played on the screens around them. We can't abandon tradition entirely. It's what we stand for. But perhaps we need to find a balance between ceremony and security. Nathan found himself nodding. The ceremonial sword at his side represented centuries of tradition, but it was also a symbol of active duty and protection. Today had proven that these responsibilities weren't mutually exclusive. They could maintain their ceremonial presence while being ready for action at any moment. Captain Burke pulled up Thompson's criminal record. Our friends are currently enjoying the hospitality of the Palace Detention Center. Initial interrogation suggests they were paid handsomely for this job. The question is, by whom? Rachel's voice cut through the tension. Sir, if they're part of a larger organization, won't they try again? Maybe not here, but somewhere else? That's exactly what we're worried about, Burke replied. Which is why we're implementing new security measures immediately. Miller Chen, you two demonstrated exactly the kind of awareness and response we need. You'll be leading training sessions for the other guards on close quarters combat while maintaining ceremonial bearing. Nathan felt a mix of pride and concern. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him as he realized their role was evolving. They needed to be more than just guardians of tradition. They had to be ready for an enemy that saw that very tradition as a weakness to exploit. The meeting continued late into the evening as they discussed new protocols and security measures. Nathan's mind kept returning to Thompson's face, to the moment the thief realized his mistake. There had been something in his eyes beyond mere surprise, something that suggested he'd underestimated not just the guards' abilities, but their entire purpose. After the meeting, Rachel caught up with Nathan in the corridor. Quite a day. From ceremonial guards to uncovering an international crime ring. Not bad for a Thursday. Nathan managed a small smile. Makes you wonder what they'll try next. We can't change who we are or what we represent, but we need to be ready. That's just it, Rachel replied, her expression thoughtful. Maybe we don't need to change who we are. Today proved that we can be both, ceremonial guards and active protectors. The tourists got quite a show, but more importantly, we sent a message to anyone else thinking of trying something similar. As they walked through the palace grounds, Nathan observed the evening guard change with new eyes. Each precise movement, each perfectly timed step now seemed to carry additional meaning. These weren't just ceremonies, they were demonstrations of discipline, training, and readiness. Captain Burke's voice echoed in his mind. You are the visible representation of our security forces. The ceremony is part of the job, but it's not the whole job. Never forget that. The night shift was taking their positions as Nathan prepared to leave. He paused to watch them, noting how their ceremonial precision masked their combat readiness. It was a balance they'd maintained for generations, but now that balance faced new challenges. Tomorrow would bring new protocols, new training sessions, and possibly new attempts by those who thought the Royal Guard was nothing more than a tourist attraction. But they would be ready. Today had proven that tradition and security could work hand in hand. That ceremony didn't preclude combat effectiveness. As Nathan finally headed home, the weight of his ceremonial sword reminded him of everything it represented. Not just centuries of tradition, but the very real responsibility of protecting one of the nation's most important institutions. They might be targets now, but they would show anyone who tried that targeting the Royal Guard was a serious mistake. Dawn broke over Windsor Palace as Nathan Miller prepared for another day of duty. The events of yesterday still weighed heavily on his mind, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. As he adjusted his uniform in the guard quarters, Rachel Chen burst through the door, her face tense with urgency. Nathan, you need to see this, she said, holding up her phone. Thompson and his crew escaped during transport to the central holding facility. They overpowered 2 officers and vanished into the city. Nathan's blood ran cold. He'd known these weren't ordinary thieves, but this level of organization suggested something far more sinister. Captain Burke called an immediate emergency briefing, gathering all available guards in the security office. This is no longer just about protecting ceremonial items, Burke announced, his voice grave. These men have proven themselves both dangerous and resourceful. We have reason to believe they'll attempt to finish what they started, possibly with reinforcements. Security footage from the escape played on the screens around them. The precision with which Thompson and his men had executed their breakout was chilling. These weren't opportunistic thieves. They were trained professionals. Sir, Nathan spoke up, studying the footage carefully. Their escape route suggests local knowledge. They knew exactly where to go, which streets to take. They must have support in the area. Burke nodded grimly. Our intelligence suggests they're connected to a sophisticated crime syndicate specializing in military artifacts. The ceremonial sword was never their real target. They wanted to prove they could breach our security. The briefing room erupted in murmurs of concern. Rachel stepped forward, pointing to a detail in the footage. Look at their equipment during the escape. That's military-grade gear. Someone's backing them with serious resources. As the implications sank in, Nathan felt the weight of his ceremonial sword more heavily than ever. These men weren't just challenging their security. They were attacking everything the Royal Guard stood for. The morning progressed with heightened tension. Tourists still gathered in St. George's Square, unaware of the dangerous game unfolding around them. Nathan maintained his post, but his senses were on high alert, scanning every face in the crowd. For signs of Thompson or his crew, Rachel's voice came through his earpiece during her patrol. Movement on the east side. 3 individuals matching our subject's description. They're too spread out to be tourists. Nathan's muscles tensed, but he maintained his ceremonial stance. Through his peripheral vision, he could see them. Thompson and his men had returned, but something was different. They moved with even more purpose than before, and this time they weren't alone. Captain Burke's voice crackled through the communication system. All units be advised. Multiple suspicious individuals identified in the square. Maintain protocol, but be ready. The tension in the air was palpable as Thompson's group began to move. They had positioned themselves strategically around the square, using the crowds as cover. Nathan could see Danny Cooper speaking into a concealed radio, coordinating with unseen accomplices. Then it happened. A series of small explosions erupted. Around the square, smoke bombs, creating chaos and confusion. Tourists scattered in panic as thick smoke filled the air. Through the chaos, Nathan saw Thompson moving directly toward him, no longer bothering with subterfuge. "You embarrassed us yesterday," Thompson snarled, close enough now for Nathan to hear him clearly. "Time to show you what happens when you interfere with professionals." Nathan remained still, following protocol until the last possible moment. Thompson reached for something inside his jacket, not going for the sword this time, but something far more dangerous. The glint of metal caught the morning sun, and Nathan's training kicked in instantly. In one fluid motion, Nathan deflected Thompson's arm, preventing him from drawing what was clearly a weapon. The move was precise, controlled, but this time Thompson was ready. He countered with a trained fighter's precision, confirming Nathan's suspicions about his military background. Around them, chaos erupted as Cooper and the others engaged with palace security. Rachel's voice cut through the comms. "Multiple hostiles, armed and trained. This isn't a theft, it's an assault." Nathan found himself locked in combat with Thompson, each man's training evident in their movements. The ceremonial sword at his side became a real weapon, as Nathan was forced to defend himself against Thompson's increasingly aggressive attacks. "You're not just thieves," Nathan said through gritted teeth as he parried another strike. "Who are you really working for?" Thompson's smile was cold. "Someone who believes all this ceremony is just for show. Time to prove them right." The square had become a battlefield. Rachel and other guards engaged with Thompson's men, their ceremonial training giving way to real combat experience. Tourists who had come to photograph the iconic guards now witnessed them in action, protecting the palace with skill that went far beyond ceremony. Captain Burke's voice commanded through the chaos, "All units protect the civilians, get them clear of the square." The coordination of the Royal Guard showed years of training as they simultaneously evacuated tourists while engaging the threats. Nathan's fight with Thompson had moved them near the palace gates. Each man sought advantage, their combat styles revealing their backgrounds. Thompson fought like a special forces operator, confirming he was far more than a common thief. "The sword was never the real target, was it?" Nathan demanded, blocking another strike. "This was about proving the Royal Guard was vulnerable." "Smart boy," Thompson sneered, "but you've only scratched the surface. This is bigger than you can imagine." A sudden movement caught Nathan's eye, Cooper aiming something at the palace walls. Without hesitation, Nathan made his choice. He broke from Thompson, charging toward Cooper. His intervention came just in time to prevent what could have been a devastating breach of palace security. The tide began to turn as palace reinforcements arrived. Thompson's men, realizing their plan had failed, began to retreat. But this time, the Royal Guard was ready. Security teams had already sealed off escape routes, and police tactical units were moving in to support. Thompson, seeing his operation crumbling, made one last desperate attempt. He pulled a small device from his jacket, some kind of detonator. "Back off, or things get really interesting," he threatened. Nathan stood his ground, ceremonial sword now held with deadly purpose. "It's over, Thompson. You've already shown us who you are. Don't make this worse." The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Finally, Thompson's hand lowered, and the device clattered to the ground. As police moved in to make arrests, he looked at Nathan with a mix of respect and hatred. "You prove me wrong about one thing," Thompson said as he was led away. "The ceremony isn't just for show, but this isn't over, not by a long shot." The aftermath of the attack on Windsor Palace unfolded like a carefully orchestrated dance. Police tactical units secured the perimeter while palace security conducted a thorough sweep of the grounds. Nathan Miller stood at his post, maintaining his ceremonial stance despite the chaos that had erupted mere minutes ago. His uniform showed signs of the intense combat, a button torn loose, a small tear in the sleeve, but his posture remained impeccable. Captain William Burke approached, his face a mask of controlled concern. "Miller, Chen, my office, now." Rachel joined them as they walked through the palace corridors, their footsteps echoing against the ancient stones. The weight of what had just transpired hung heavy in the air. Inside Burke's office, screens displayed security footage from multiple angles, showing the full scope of Thompson's assault. "MI5 is involved now," Burke announced, his voice tight with tension. "What happened today wasn't just about stealing artifacts. They're calling it a probe, testing our responses, our capabilities." Nathan watched the footage of his fight with Thompson, analyzing every move. "His combat style, sir. It was military, but not British forces. The way he moved, his tactics, they were different." Rachel nodded in agreement. Cooper, too. Their coordination was too precise for common criminals. They've had specialized training. Burke pulled up a classified file on his computer. "Intelligence suggests they're part of a group called the Shadow Legion. They're mercenaries, former special forces operators from various countries who now work for the highest bidder. The question is, who hired them to target us?" The revelation sent a chill through the room. Nathan recalled Thompson's words during their fight. "This is bigger than you can imagine." Now those words carried new weight. "The device Cooper tried to plant on the palace walls," Burke continued, showing them a close-up image. "It wasn't explosive. It was some kind of surveillance equipment. They weren't just testing our security. They were trying to breach it permanently." Rachel leaned forward, studying the image. "Those components looked military-grade. Someone's investing serious resources into this operation." "Exactly," Burke confirmed. "And that's what worries our superiors. The Shadow Legion doesn't come cheap. Someone with deep pockets wants to prove that the Royal Guard is vulnerable, that our ceremonies make us weak." Nathan's jaw tightened. "They're wrong. Today proved that our training goes far beyond ceremony." "It did," Burke agreed. "But it also revealed something they wanted to know, how we respond to a direct threat. Every move we made, every tactic we employed, they were studying us." The implications were staggering. Nathan and Rachel exchanged glances, both understanding that their role as royal guards had just become far more complex. They weren't just protecting tradition anymore. They were defending against a sophisticated enemy who sought to undermine everything they stood for. Burke pulled up another file, this one showing profiles of known Shadow Legion operatives. Thompson and his team are part of their elite unit. They specialize in high-risk infiltration operations. The fact that they were assigned to this mission suggests our opponent is planning something much bigger. "Sir," Nathan spoke up, his mind racing through the possibilities. "The ceremonial sword, it was never about stealing it, was it? They wanted to see if they could get close enough to a guard to take it. They were testing our close-quarters response." "Precisely," Burke nodded grimly. "And now they have data on how we react, how quickly we can mobilize, our combat capabilities. The question is, what do they plan to do with that information?" Rachel's expression hardened. "We need to change our protocols, adapt our responses. But we can't abandon our ceremonial duties. That's exactly what they want us to do." The captain stood, pacing behind his desk. That's our challenge. We need to maintain our ceremonial presence while upgrading our security measures. Miller, Jen, you two showed today that it's possible to do both. I want you to help develop new training protocols for the guard unit. Nathan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. They had to find a way to preserve centuries of tradition while preparing for a threat that was anything but traditional. There's more, Burke added, his voice growing more serious. Intelligence suggests Thompson's team wasn't acting alone. We've detected increased surveillance of other royal sites across the country. The Shadow Legion appears to be mapping our entire security network. The room fell silent as the full scope of the threat became clear. This wasn't just about Windsor Palace. It was about the entire royal security apparatus. What about Thompson and his team? Rachel asked. Are they talking? Burke shook his head. They're professionals. They know how to resist interrogation, but their equipment is giving us some leads. The surveillance device Cooper tried to plant, it's yielding interesting data about their support network. Nathan studied the footage again, focusing on the moments before the attack. Sir, the way they use the tourists as cover, how they coordinated their smoke bombs. They had to have inside knowledge of our rotation schedules, our standard response procedures. We're conducting internal security reviews, Burke confirmed. No one is above suspicion. That's another reason I want you two involved in developing new protocols. You've proven yourselves today. Rachel's voice was determined. They thought our ceremonies made us predictable, vulnerable. We'll show them that tradition and tactical readiness aren't mutually exclusive. As the briefing concluded, Nathan and Rachel walked together through the palace corridors. The evening sun cast long shadows through the ancient windows, a reminder of the centuries of history they were sworn to protect. They'll try again, Rachel said quietly. The Shadow Legion doesn't fail missions without consequences. Nathan nodded, his hand resting on his ceremonial sword. Let them try. Now we know what we're dealing with. Next time, we'll be more than ready. The morning after the Shadow Legion's attack, Nathan Miller found himself standing before a panel of senior military officials in Windsor Palace's secure conference room. The atmosphere was tense as General Richard Harrison, head of Royal Security, reviewed the footage of yesterday's confrontation. Guard Miller, the general began, his voice carrying decades of authority. Your actions yesterday deviated significantly from standard protocol. You engaged in direct combat on palace grounds, used your ceremonial weapon as a defensive tool, and made tactical decisions without explicit authorization. Nathan stood at attention, his posture perfect despite the exhaustion of the past 24 hours. Rachel Chen watched from her position near the door, her presence both supportive and professional. With all due respect, sir, Nathan responded, the situation demanded immediate action. The Shadow Legion operatives presented a clear and present danger to both the palace and civilian visitors. General Harrison's expression remained neutral. I'm not criticizing your decisions, Guard Miller. I'm trying to understand them. Walk us through your thought process during the engagement. Nathan took a deep breath, recalling the intensity of the moment. When Thompson and his team deployed the smoke bombs, I recognized it as a tactical pattern similar to special forces. Diversionary tactics. Their positioning, their timing, everything indicated this was a professional military operation. The general nodded, turning to Captain Burke. Your assessment of Guard Miller's performance? Burke stepped forward, his voice confident. Miller demonstrated exceptional judgment under pressure. His combat engagement with Thompson revealed crucial intelligence about the Shadow Legion's capabilities and intentions. More importantly, he maintained ceremonial bearing until the absolute last possible moment, proving that our traditional protocols can adapt to modern threats. Rachel spoke up from her position. Sir, if I may, what we witnessed yesterday wasn't just an attack on the palace. It was an attempt to force us to choose between tradition and security. They wanted to prove we couldn't maintain both. The room fell silent as her words sank in. General Harrison studied the security footage again, focusing on the moment Nathan transitioned from ceremonial guard to combat operative. "The media is already running with this story," the general said, gesturing to several news reports displayed on nearby screens. "Public reaction is interesting. Many see this as a powerful demonstration that the Royal Guard is more than ceremonial, but others worry about the implications of armed combat at a major tourist destination." Nathan felt the weight of scrutiny from every person in the room. "Sir, the Shadow Legion didn't just target our security, they targeted what we represent. They wanted to prove that our traditions make us vulnerable." "And what do you think they learned instead?" General Harrison asked, his eyes sharp. "That tradition and capability aren't mutually exclusive," Nathan replied firmly. "That the ceremonies they mock are built on centuries of real military discipline and training." The general's expression softened slightly. "That's precisely what I wanted to hear, Guard Miller. Because what happened yesterday is just the beginning." Captain Burke stepped forward, activating a secure display. "Intelligence reports confirm increased Shadow Legion activity across multiple royal sites. They're analyzing our response, adapting their strategies. Yesterday's attack was a test. Next time, they'll come better prepared." "Which brings us to why you're here," General Harrison continued. "We're implementing new security protocols across all royal sites. Guard Miller, Guard Chen, your experience with the Shadow Legion makes you uniquely qualified to help develop these protocols." Rachel moved to stand beside Nathan. "What exactly are you proposing, sir?" "A specialized unit within the Royal Guard," Burke explained. "One that maintains our ceremonial duties while being prepared for sophisticated tactical threats. You'll help train other guards to recognize and respond to similar situations without compromising our traditional role." Nathan processed this information, understanding the delicate balance they were being asked to strike. "The Shadow Legion thought our ceremonies made us predictable. We can use that assumption against them." "Exactly," General Harrison nodded. "But this assignment comes with significant risks. The Legion will be watching, studying, planning their next move. You'll need to maintain absolute secrecy about these new protocols." The implications were clear. They would be walking a tightrope between public ceremony and covert preparation, never knowing when the next attack might come. "There's more," Burke added, his voice grave. "Forensic analysis of the surveillance device Cooper tried to plant revealed sophisticated technology we've only seen in state-sponsored operations. Someone with significant resources is backing the Shadow Legion's activities." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Are we looking at a foreign power attempting to undermine royal security?" "That's one possibility," General Harrison confirmed. "But there could be other motivations we haven't yet identified. Your new assignment includes gathering intelligence on their support network." Nathan thought about Thompson's words during their fight. "This is bigger than you can imagine." The pieces were starting to fall into place, revealing a conspiracy that went far beyond a simple attempt to steal a ceremonial sword. "Sir," Nathan addressed the general, "what about our regular duties? The public expects to see the Royal Guard maintaining its traditional presence." "That's the challenging part," Burke responded. "You'll need to balance both roles. Your ceremonial duties provide perfect cover for monitoring potential threats, but they also make you visible targets." General Harrison stood, his bearing commanding attention. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. We have reason to believe there are Shadow Legion sympathizers within the palace staff. Your training operations must appear routine to anyone watching." The revelation sent a chill through the room. The enemy wasn't just external. They had to watch for threats from within as well. "You've both demonstrated exceptional judgment," the general continued. That's why you're being entrusted with this responsibility. The Royal Guard must evolve while preserving the traditions that make us who we are. As the briefing concluded, Nathan and Rachel walked together through the palace corridors, their minds processing everything they'd learned. The weight of their new assignment added another layer to their already significant responsibilities. "They're trying to force us to change," Rachel said quietly, "to abandon our traditions in the name of security. We can't let them succeed." Nathan nodded, watching tourists photograph the changing of the guard through nearby windows. "Then we won't. We'll show them that the ceremonies they mock are built on real strength, real discipline." The training grounds behind Windsor Palace echoed with the sound of combat as Nathan Miller and Rachel Chen worked with a select group of Royal Guards. 3 weeks had passed since the Shadow Legion's attack, and they were implementing their new dual-purpose training program under the watchful eye of Captain Burke. "Remember," Nathan called out to the assembled guards, "the key is maintaining ceremonial posture until the last possible moment. The enemy expects us to be slow, ceremonial. Use that assumption against them." Rachel demonstrated a fluid transition from ceremonial stance to defensive position, her movements precise and controlled. Every ceremony we perform contains elements of combat training. Our predecessors knew what they were doing. They built battle techniques into our traditional movements. As the training session progressed, Nathan noticed a new guard, David Foster, struggling with the transitions. He approached the young man quietly, remembering his own early days in the Royal Guard. "You're thinking too much about it," Nathan advised, demonstrating the movement. "These ceremonies are part of our DNA now. Trust your training. Let it flow, naturally, into defensive action." Foster nodded, his expression determined. "It's just different from what I expected when I joined the Guard. I thought we were mainly ceremonial." "That's exactly what our enemies think too," Rachel added, joining them. "And that's our advantage. Now try it again." As Foster practiced the movement, Nathan and Rachel exchanged knowing looks. They were responsible for preparing these guards for threats most people didn't even know existed, all while maintaining the dignity and precision expected of the Royal Guard. Later that evening, Nathan and Rachel sat in the guard break room, reviewing security footage from other royal sites. Their new assignment included monitoring for any signs of Shadow Legion activity across all royal properties. "Look at this," Rachel said, pointing to a screen showing footage from another palace. "The tourist patterns have changed. More people lingering in specific spots, taking photos of security features rather than the architecture." Nathan studied the footage carefully. "They're mapping our positions, our routines, just like Thompson's team did before their attack." Captain Burke entered the room, carrying a thick file. "Good eye, Chen. We've noticed similar patterns at 3 other sites. The Shadow Legion is definitely planning something bigger." He spread photographs across the table, showing surveillance images of known Legion operatives. "Thompson still isn't talking, but his equipment gave us leads. We've identified several Legion safe houses in London." "Sir," Nathan began, picking up one of the photos, "have we determined who's backing them? This level of operation requires significant resources." Burke's expression darkened. "That's where it gets complicated. We've traced some of their funding to a private military corporation called Aegis Strategic. On the surface, they're legitimate. Government contracts, security consulting, but dig deeper. And they're not what they seem," Rachel finished. "Like us, but for different reasons." "Exactly," Burke nodded. "They have connections to former military officials who believe traditional forces are obsolete. They're using the Shadow Legion to prove their point." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. "They're not just targeting our security, they're targeting everything we represent. Tradition, ceremony, history itself. Which is why your training program is so crucial." Burke emphasized. We need guards who can maintain our traditions while being prepared for anything. A knock at the door interrupted them. David Foster entered looking slightly nervous. "Sir, there's something you should see. During today's public tours, I noticed someone taking detailed notes about our rotation schedules." Nathan and Rachel followed Foster to the security office, where he pulled up the day's surveillance footage. The image showed a well-dressed woman in her 40s, methodically documenting guard movements while pretending to be a tourist. "Good catch, Foster," Rachel praised. "This is exactly the kind of observation we need from everyone." Nathan studied the woman's movements. Her behavior patterns match Legion reconnaissance protocols. We should alert MI5, have them run facial recognition. As they analyzed the footage, Nathan reflected on how much had changed in the past weeks. The Royal Guard was evolving, adapting to new threats while preserving their essential nature. It wasn't just about protecting buildings anymore. It was about protecting what these ceremonies and traditions meant to people. "You know what impresses me most?" Rachel said quietly as they worked. "How quickly the other guards have adapted to the new protocols. They understand what's at stake." Nathan nodded, watching Foster apply his training to analyze the surveillance footage. "They're proving what we've always known. The ceremony isn't just for show. It's about discipline, dedication, being ready for anything." Captain Burke joined them, reviewing Foster's findings. "This is good work, all of you, but remember, we have to assume we're being watched too. Every training session, every security sweep has to appear routine to outside observers." The next morning, as Nathan took his post at the palace gates, he viewed the gathering tourists with new awareness. Any one of them could be Legion reconnaissance. The challenge was maintaining the Royal Guard's welcoming ceremonial presence, while staying alert for threats. Rachel passed by on her patrol route, every movement perfect in its ceremonial precision. To tourists, she was a perfect example of traditional pageantry. To Nathan, who knew what to look for, she was scanning the crowd, analyzing patterns, ready to respond to any threat. "The ceremony is our shield," she had said during training. "It lets us hide in plain sight, be more than what they expect us to be." As the morning progressed, Nathan observed David Foster at his post, noting how the young guard had incorporated their training. His ceremonial stance was flawless, but there was new awareness in his bearing, a readiness that hadn't been there before. Captain Burke's words from their briefing echoed in Nathan's mind. "The Shadow Legion thinks they can force us to choose between tradition and security. We'll show them that for the Royal Guard, they're one and the same." A heavy rain fell over Windsor Palace as Nathan Miller reviewed the latest intelligence reports in the security office. 1 month had passed since the Shadow Legion's attack, and the quiet that followed felt more like the calm before a storm than any real peace. His concentration was broken by rapid footsteps in the corridor. Rachel Chen burst into the room, her expression urgent. "Nathan, you need to see this. Thompson's escaped again, but this time it's different." Captain Burke followed close behind her, carrying a laptop displaying news footage. The scene showed chaos at the high-security facility where Thompson had been held. Guards down, systems disabled, and a level of precision that went beyond even the Shadow Legion's usual capabilities. "This wasn't just an escape," Burke said grimly. "It was a recruitment. Aegis Strategic sent a team to extract him. They're done hiding their connection to the Legion." Security footage from the prison played on screen, showing Thompson being met by a sleek black vehicle. A figure stepped out, tall, distinguished, wearing an expensive suit. Nathan leaned forward, studying the man's face. "That's Victor Crane," Burke explained, "CEO of Aegis Strategic. This is the first time he's shown his hand directly. Something big is coming." Rachel pulled up additional footage on another screen. "There's more. In the past 24 hours, we've detected increased surveillance at all major royal sites. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Nathan studied the patterns of activity. They want us to know they're watching. This is psychological warfare, trying to make us doubt our training, our traditions. David Foster entered the room, carrying more reports. Sir, we've identified 3 more Legion operatives among the tourist groups today. They're getting bolder, almost taunting us. Burke's expression hardened, because they're building to something. Crane didn't just break Thompson out. He's sending us a message. The question is, what's their real target? Nathan reviewed the surveillance photos, noting the methodical way the Legion operatives were documenting palace security. They're not just gathering intelligence anymore. This feels like verification. They're confirming what they already know. Rachel nodded in agreement. Like they're running through a checklist, everything we've taught our guards about, spotting their reconnaissance. They're deliberately letting us see it now. Which means, whatever they're planning, they think it doesn't matter if we know, Burke concluded. They believe our response protocols won't be enough. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Nathan thought about the training they'd been conducting, the guards they'd prepared. Would it be enough against whatever Crane and the Shadow Legion were planning? A senior intelligence officer, Sarah Harrison, joined them, bringing more troubling news. We've intercepted communications between Aegis Strategic and several former military officials. Crane is hosting a demonstration next week, promising to prove that traditional security forces are obsolete. Windsor Palace, Nathan said suddenly, the pieces clicking into place. That's their target. They're not just going to attack, they're going to make a spectacle of it, prove their point to potential clients. Burke pulled up a calendar. The changing of the guard ceremony. Next week we're conducting the full ceremonial rotation with all the pageantry. Hundreds of tourists, media coverage. The perfect stage, Rachel finished. If they can breach our security during our most traditional display. They prove their point, Nathan agreed. That ceremony and tradition make us vulnerable, that the future belongs to private military corporations like Aegis. David Foster studied the surveillance footage, but we're not what they think we are anymore. The training, the new protocols, we're ready for them. Are we? Burke challenged. Crane didn't get where he is by being predictable. Thompson's escape was just the beginning. They'll have something planned that we haven't prepared for. Nathan stood, moving to the window that overlooked the palace grounds. Tourists still gathered despite the rain, cameras flashing as guards performed their ceremonial duties. Everything the Royal Guard stood for, tradition, ceremony, dedication, was being targeted not just by force, but by an ideology that saw them as relics of the past. Sir, he turned to Burke, we need to let them think they're right. Use their assumptions against them. Rachel caught his meaning. The ceremony next week, we make it look exactly like they expect. All tradition, no tactical awareness. But underneath, Nathan continued, we'll have everything in place. Every guard trained and ready, every new protocol activated. Let them think we're stuck in the past. Burke considered the proposal. It's risky if we're wrong about their plans. We won't be, Nathan assured him. Crane and Thompson want to humiliate us, prove their point. They'll come at us exactly where and when we look most ceremonial, most traditional. Sarah Harrison nodded approvingly. We can use this. Feed them intelligence that confirms their assumptions about our capabilities. Make them overconfident. The strategy took shape as they planned. Every ceremonial movement would conceal a tactical position. Every traditional formation would serve a defensive purpose. They would turn the very pageantry, the Shadow Legion, mocked into their greatest weapon. David, Nathan addressed the young guard, spread the word to the others. Every guard needs to be perfect in their ceremony next week. Not just for tradition's sake, but because our lives might depend on it. Rachel began mapping out positions. We'll need to coordinate with MI5, have tactical teams ready but hidden. Everything has to look exactly like a normal ceremonial day. To Dyson, as they worked, Nathan felt the weight of what they were planning. The Shadow Legion thought they were targeting an outdated institution, clinging to tradition in a modern world. They had no idea that those very traditions had evolved, adapted, become something more than mere ceremony. The day before the changing of the guard ceremony dawned cold and clear. Nathan Miller stood at his post, watching the sun rise over Windsor Palace. Every detail had been planned, every contingency considered, yet tension hung in the air like a physical presence. In the guard-ready room, Rachel Chen was conducting final briefings with their specially trained unit. David Foster and other selected guards listened intently as she reviewed their preparations one last time. Tomorrow isn't just about protecting the palace, Rachel emphasized. It's about proving that tradition and effectiveness aren't mutually exclusive. Crane and the Shadow Legion think our ceremonies make us weak. We're going to show them how wrong they are. Captain Burke entered, carrying fresh intelligence reports. Aegis Strategic's guest list for tomorrow's demonstration reads like a who's who of private military contractors. Crane's bringing potential clients to witness what he claims will be the end of traditional security forces. Nathan joined them, his ceremonial uniform impeccable as always. Any sign of Thompson or his team? Multiple sightings around London, Burke confirmed. They're moving pieces into position. Our surveillance picked up several Shadow Legion operatives checking into hotels near the palace. They're not even trying to stay hidden anymore. David Foster pulled up security footage on the main screen. Sir, we've identified at least 12 known Legion operators in the area. Their positioning suggests they're planning a multi-point assault. Nathan studied the footage, noting the professional way the Legion members were conducting their reconnaissance. They want us to see them. Everything they're doing is designed to make us question our preparations, wonder what we've missed. Rachel pointed to several key positions on the palace layout. We've reinforced all vulnerable points without making it obvious. Every ceremonial position doubles as a tactical advantage. The ceremony itself becomes our defense. The briefing continued as they refined their plans. Each guard would maintain perfect ceremonial form while being ready for instant action. Their traditional movements, practiced for centuries, had been subtly modified to allow for rapid response without breaking ceremony until the last possible moment. There's something else, Burke added, his voice grave. MI5 intercepted partial communications between Crane and his operators. Whatever they're planning goes beyond just disrupting the ceremony. They want to access something inside the palace itself. Nathan's mind raced through the possibilities. The royal vault, classified documents. We're not sure, Burke admitted, but Crane's investment in this operation suggests something specific. The ceremony disruption might just be a diversion for their real objective. Sarah Harrison arrived with updated intelligence. We've confirmed Crane's arrival in London. He's booked the entire top floor of the Royal Windsor Hotel. His security detail includes former Special Forces operators from 3 different countries. He's preparing quite a show, Rachel observed. All these high-profile guests, the obvious. Surveillance. He wants to maximize the impact when his plan succeeds. If it succeeds, David corrected, his young face set with determination. Everything we've trained for has led to this moment. Nathan walked to the window, watching. Tourists gather in the courtyard below. Tomorrow, these grounds would be packed with visitors, media, and hidden among them, Shadow Legion operatives waiting to strike. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him as he thought about everything at stake. We've identified most, of their surveillance positions, Sarah continued, marking points on the palace schematic. They've been particularly interested in the ceremonial parade route and the guard changeover points, because that's when we're most exposed, Nathan noted. Or at least when we appear to be. Every ceremonial movement tomorrow will look exactly like they expect, but serve a tactical purpose they won't see coming. Rachel joined him at the window. The Legion thinks our traditions make us predictable. They don't understand that these ceremonies have survived centuries because they work. We're not just preserving tradition, we're adapting it. Captain Burke gathered them for final assignments. Tomorrow, everything has to be perfect. Not just the ceremony, but our response when they make their move. The world will be watching, and Crane is counting on that. He wants to publicly demonstrate our obsolescence. Instead, Nathan said firmly, we'll demonstrate why the Royal Guard has endured. Our strength isn't just in our traditions, it's in how we honor them while adapting to new threats. As evening approached, the guards dispersed to their positions. Nathan and Rachel conducted one last walk-through of the parade route, checking every position, every angle. Tomorrow's ceremony would follow the exact same path it had for generations, but now each step, each movement held additional significance. "Do you think they suspect?" David asked as they completed their inspection. "That we're more prepared than we seem?" "Crane's arrogance works in our favor," Nathan replied. "He sees our ceremonies as weaknesses to exploit. He doesn't understand that they're actually our greatest strength." Rachel checked her communication device one last time. "All units are in position for tomorrow. MI5 tactical teams are staged nearby, ready to respond if needed. Everything looks exactly like a normal ceremonial preparation." As night fell over Windsor Palace, Nathan stood at his post one last time. Tomorrow would test everything they'd trained for, everything they believed in. The Shadow Legion thought they were targeting an outdated institution, clinging to ceremony in a modern world. They had no idea that those very ceremonies had evolved into something far more formidable. The morning of the changing of the guard, ceremony arrived with perfect weather and massive crowds gathering at Windsor Palace. Nathan Miller stood at his post, every inch the perfect ceremonial guard, while his trained eyes scanned the growing sea of faces for familiar threats. Through his earpiece, Rachel Chen's voice reported positions. Multiple Legion operators spotted in the East Quadrant. Thompson is with them, and Crane just arrived with his potential clients. They're positioning themselves for optimal viewing of the ceremony. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Victor Crane, impeccable in an expensive suit, led a group of distinguished-looking individuals to a privileged viewing area. His confident smile suggested a man certain of his victory. Captain Burke's voice came through the communication system. "All units maintain ceremony. Let them think everything is proceeding normally. Wait for my signal before executing contingency protocols." The traditional music began, signaling the start of the ceremony. Guards moved with precise, practiced steps, their formations perfect, their timing immaculate. To the watching crowds, it appeared exactly like any other changing of the guard ceremony. Through his peripheral vision, Nathan spotted Thompson moving through the crowd, accompanied by several Shadow Legion operators. They were dressed as tourists, but their movements betrayed their military training. David Foster, positioned at the palace entrance, transmitted quietly, "Sir, detecting unauthorized electronic signatures. They're activating something in the crowd." Suddenly, the palace's security systems began flickering. Cameras rotated randomly, electronic locks cycled, and communication channels filled with static. Crane's technical team had launched their cyber assault. "Maintain ceremony," Burke ordered calmly. "This is just their first move. Stay focused." The guards continued their ceremonial movements, giving no indication that anything was amiss. Nathan led his section through the traditional exchange, every step calculated, every position tactical. though appearing purely ceremonial. Rachel's voice cut through the static. Multiple threats converging. They're using the ceremony as cover to approach restricted areas. That's when Crane made his move. Standing before his assembled guests, he spoke into a phone, and chaos erupted. Smoke bombs detonated at strategic points around the square, while hidden Legion operators emerged from the crowd, moving with military precision. "Now!" Burke commanded. The transformation was instantaneous. The ceremonial formations shifted seamlessly into defensive positions. Guards who appeared to be performing traditional movements were suddenly engaging hostile operators with practiced efficiency. Nathan found himself facing Thompson again, but this time both men knew exactly what they were dealing with. "You really thought we wouldn't be ready?" Nathan asked, blocking a strike while maintaining his position. Thompson's sneer held respect, despite his hatred. "Doesn't matter if you were ready. This isn't the real target." Realization struck Nathan as Thompson's words registered. The attack on the ceremony was a diversion. Through the chaos, he spotted Crane moving purposefully toward a specific section of the palace, flanked by elite Legion operators. "Rachel! David! The ceremony is a distraction," Nathan called through the comms. "Crane's going for something inside the palace. 3rd sector, East Wing." Without breaking ceremony until the last possible moment, Rachel and David's units smoothly transitioned to intercept Crane's team. The tourists watched in amazement as the perfectly executed ceremonial movements transformed into precisely coordinated defensive maneuvers. Crane's voice carried across the square as he addressed his guests. "Watch closely, ladies and gentlemen. Today we demonstrate how obsolete traditional security forces have become. Their adherence to ceremony makes them predictable, vulnerable. But as his Legion operators engaged with the Royal Guard, his confident smile began to fade. Every ceremonial position had a tactical advantage. Every traditional formation served a strategic purpose. The Guards moved with a combination of classical training and modern combat techniques that the Legion hadn't anticipated. Nathan fought his way toward Crane's position, aware that the real threat lay in whatever the CEO was truly after. Through his earpiece, he heard David reporting, "Sir, they're heading for the secure archives, something specific in the royal historical records." The demonstration was never about proving we're obsolete, Nathan realized aloud. They're after classified information, something they can sell to the highest bidder. Rachel's voice confirmed his suspicion. "Security. Breach detected in the archive sector. They're using some kind of advanced decryption device." Captain Burke's orders came swiftly. "Miller Chen, converge on the archive. Foster, maintain perimeter control. Don't let any of them escape with downloaded data." Nathan engaged 2 more Legion operators, his movements fluid and precise. The years of ceremonial drill had honed his body control to perfection, making his combat techniques even more effective. Around him, other guards demonstrated the same, devastating combination of traditional discipline and modern tactical prowess. Crane's guests were watching, but not with the appreciation he'd planned for. Instead, they witnessed the Royal Guard systematically dismantling what was supposed to be an elite private military force, all while maintaining the dignity and precision of their ceremonial bearing. Nathan finally reached the archive sector, finding Rachel already engaged with Crane's technical team. The CEO stood by a computer terminal, frustration evident on his face as his perfect plan unraveled. "It's over, Crane," Nathan announced, his ceremonial sword now held with deadly purpose. "Whatever you're after, you won't get it." Crane's composed facade cracked slightly. "You don't even know what you're protecting, do you? The secrets in these archives. They're worth more than this entire palace." "Their worth isn't the point," Rachel countered, disarming another Legion. operator. We protect them because it's our duty, our tradition. Tradition, Crane spat the word. That's why you'll lose in the end. The world has no place for ceremonial soldiers anymore. That's where you're wrong, Nathan replied. Our ceremonies aren't just for show. They're a demonstration of discipline, dedication, and capability, something you clearly don't understand. The fight concluded swiftly after that. MI5 tactical teams moved in to secure Legion operators, while Palace security contained the situation in the square. Tourists, who had come to watch a ceremony instead, witnessed the Royal Guard demonstrate why their traditions had endured for so long. The aftermath of the Shadow Legion's attack unfolded in the secure briefing room deep within Windsor Palace. Nathan Miller, Rachel Chen, and David Foster stood before a panel of senior military officials and intelligence officers as Captain Burke presented their findings. The data Crane was attempting to access, Burke began, contained classified information about royal security protocols dating back centuries. But that wasn't his real target. He paused, pulling up encrypted files on the main screen. Hidden within these historical records were details about a network of underground passages and secure rooms beneath multiple royal properties. Sarah Harrison from MI5 stepped forward. We've discovered that Aegis Strategic has been contracted by several hostile foreign agencies. They weren't just trying to prove traditional security forces obsolete. They were mapping our entire royal security infrastructure. Nathan studied the documents carefully, the ceremonial aspects of our duty. They weren't just tradition. They were covering active security protocols all along. Precisely, General Harrison confirmed. For centuries, the Royal Guard's ceremonies have served dual purposes. Every formation, every patrol route was designed to protect these secret locations while appearing purely ceremonial. Rachel's eyes widened with understanding. That's why they needed to discredit us publicly. They couldn't access these secrets without first proving our methods were outdated. The room fell silent as security footage from the confrontation played across multiple screens. The perfect coordination between ceremonial movement and tactical response was even more impressive in replay. What you achieved today, General Harrison addressed them, wasn't just stopping a security breach. You proved that tradition and modern capability aren't just compatible, they're complementary. David Foster, still bearing a few bruises from the fight, spoke up. Sir, what about Thompson and the other Legion operators? Burke switched the display to show holding cell footage. Thompson's talking. The Shadow Legion's entire network is unraveling. Turns out some of their operators weren't happy about being used as pawns in Crane's corporate demonstration. Nathan watched the footage of Thompson's interrogation. He really believed we were obsolete. They all did. That's why their plan failed. They couldn't imagine ceremony and combat effectiveness existing together. Speaking of Crane, Rachel interjected, what happened to his potential clients? Sarah Harrison allowed herself a small smile. They've all withdrawn their interest in Aegis Strategic. Watching their elite operators get systematically outmaneuvered by ceremonial guards wasn't exactly a strong sales pitch. The briefing continued as they analyzed every aspect of the incident. The Royal Guard's response had been perfect, maintaining ceremonial precision until the last possible moment, then transitioning seamlessly into highly effective tactical operations. There's something else you should see, Burke said, pulling up new footage. Social media is flooded with videos from tourists who witnessed the event. Public response has been overwhelming. The screens filled with clips showing the Royal Guard in action. Comments praised their professionalism, their ability to maintain dignity and precision even while defending the palace. The ceremony hadn't been compromised by the conflict. It had been enhanced by it. This is why our traditions endure, Nathan realized aloud. They're not just for show. They're about maintaining standards, discipline, readiness, even in the middle of combat. General Harrison nodded approvingly. Which brings us to why you're here. The success of your training program, your integration of ceremonial duty with tactical response, has attracted attention at the highest levels. Burke stepped forward with official documents. We're expanding the program. Every Royal Guard unit will now incorporate your methods. You'll be leading the development of new training protocols that preserve our traditions while preparing for modern threats. Rachel reviewed the documents with growing excitement. This goes beyond Windsor Palace. You want to implement this across all royal security forces? Exactly, the general confirmed. What you've proven here, that ceremony and combat effectiveness, can coexist. It's changed everything. The Royal Guard won't just survive in the modern era, it will lead the way in showing how traditional forces can adapt without losing their identity. David Foster straightened with pride. The Shadow Legion thought our ceremonies made us weak. Instead, they made us stronger than they could imagine. A knock at the door interrupted them. A senior palace official entered, carrying sealed orders. Her Majesty has taken personal interest in today's events. She's particularly impressed with how the Guard maintained ceremonial dignity while defending the palace. The official continued reading from the document. In recognition of their service and innovation, the unit will receive special commendation. Furthermore, their training methods will be officially incorporated into Royal Guard doctrine. Nathan felt the weight of history in that moment. Generations of Royal Guards had maintained these ceremonies, passing down not just traditions, but the core principles of discipline, dedication, and adaptability that made them effective guardians. There's more, Burke added. Intelligence suggests other traditional security forces worldwide are facing similar challenges from private military corporations. They're requesting our guidance in adapting their own protocols. Rachel's expression was thoughtful. So, our success here goes beyond just defending the palace. We're protecting the very concept of traditional security forces. Precisely, General Harrison confirmed. You've proven that ceremony and tradition aren't weaknesses to be exploited, they're foundations to build upon. As the briefing concluded, Nathan, Rachel, and David walked together through the palace corridors. The evening sun cast long shadows through ancient windows, a reminder of the history they were now part of. You know what this means, Rachel said quietly. Everything changes from here. Nathan nodded, watching tourists photograph the Guard change through nearby windows. Not everything. The ceremonies remain the same. We just understand their purpose better now. 3 months after the Shadow Legion's attack, Windsor Palace gleamed in the morning sun as Nathan Miller supervised a new group of Royal Guard trainees. The courtyard buzzed with activity as recruits practiced the precise blend of ceremonial movement and tactical awareness that had become the Guard's trademark. Rachel Chen stood beside him, watching David Foster demonstrate a particularly challenging transition to the new Guards. Remember, David called out to his students, the ceremony isn't just for show. Every movement has purpose. Every position has tactical value. The transformation of the Royal Guard had been remarkable. What started as their response to a crisis had evolved into a revolutionary approach to traditional security forces. News outlets worldwide had covered their success, and delegations from various countries now regularly visited to observe their training methods. Quite a change from when we started, Rachel remarked, adjusting her ceremonial sword. Remember when they thought we were just tourist attractions? Nathan nodded, noting the perfect form of a young guard transitioning from ceremonial stance to defensive position. Now we're setting the standard for military units worldwide. Traditional forces are adapting our methods across the globe. Captain Burke approached, carrying fresh intelligence reports. The Shadow Legion is officially disbanded. Our success here sparked investigations into private military corporations worldwide. Aegis Strategic's contracts have been cancelled, and Crane is facing multiple criminal charges. But the real victory wasn't just in defeating their enemies. It was in how they transformed the perception of ceremonial guards everywhere. Tourist numbers had actually increased since the incident, with visitors now showing deeper respect for the guards' dual role as ceremonial figures and elite protectors. The latest training program evaluations just came in, Burke continued. Every royal security site reports improved effectiveness since implementing your integrated protocols. We're not just preserving tradition, we're evolving it. Inside the palace, Nathan led a briefing for international military observers. Representatives from traditional units worldwide had come to learn how the Royal Guard had successfully bridged the gap between ceremony and modern security. The key, Nathan explained to the assembled officers, is understanding that our traditions aren't limitations, they're assets. Every ceremonial movement contains centuries of refined tactical wisdom. We just had to remember how to see it. Rachel joined the presentation, demonstrating how traditional drill movements could seamlessly transition into combat maneuvers. Your ceremonies, your traditions, they're not just for show. They're the foundation of discipline, precision, and readiness. The impact of their success extended far beyond Windsor Palace. Traditional military units that had faced similar challenges from private contractors were now proving their worth using the Royal Guard's methods. The wave of modernization that had threatened to make ceremonial forces obsolete had instead sparked their evolution. "We've had another request," Burke announced later that day. "The Household Cavalry wants to adapt our training protocols for mounted units. Apparently, even ceremonial horseback riding can incorporate tactical elements." David Foster, now a full instructor in the new program, smiled at the news. "Next thing you know, we'll be teaching ceremonial bagpipers how to use their instruments as tactical assets." The joke carried a kernel of truth. Their success had shown that any traditional military skill could be adapted for modern challenges without losing its ceremonial value. The Royal Guard had proved that dignity and effectiveness could coexist. In the guard quarters, Nathan reviewed photographs from the day of the attack. Images showed guards maintaining perfect ceremonial bearing even while engaging hostile operators. The precision of their movements, the dignity of their response, had sent a powerful message about the true nature of traditional forces. "Thompson asked to speak with you," Rachel mentioned, joining him. "He's been cooperative since his arrest, helping authorities dismantle what's left of the Legion's network." Nathan considered the request. "What does he want?" "To understand," Rachel replied. "He says watching us that day changed his perspective on traditional military units. He wants to know how we did it." Ooh. The visit to Thompson's holding facility revealed how completely their victory had changed things. The former Legion operator had lost his sneering confidence, replaced by genuine curiosity about the Royal Guard's methods. "I thought ceremony made you weak," Thompson admitted during their conversation. "Predictable. Instead, it made you more effective than any private military force I've worked with." Nathan studied his former adversary, because we never forgot what the ceremonies really mean. They're not just tradition, they're the physical expression of dedication, discipline, and duty. Back at Windsor Palace, the day's final guard. Change commenced. Tourists gathered to watch, their phones recording every precise movement. But now their comments showed understanding beyond mere appreciation for pageantry. "Look how they move," one visitor whispered to another. "Every step has purpose. They're not just performing, they're protecting." As the sun set over the palace, Nathan, Rachel, and David watched the evening patrol take their positions. Each guard moved with the perfect balance of ceremonial dignity and tactical readiness that had become their hallmark. "We did more than stop an attack," Rachel observed. "We proved that tradition isn't a weakness. It's a strength that evolves, adapts, endures." Nathan nodded, watching the next generation of royal guards take their posts. "That's why these ceremonies have lasted centuries. They're not just about maintaining tradition, they're about passing down the core principles that make us effective guardians. And now," David added, "we're showing the world how to do the same." The legacy of their victory would echo through the halls of Windsor Palace for generations to come. They had faced the challenge of their time and proved that ceremony and combat effectiveness weren't mutually exclusive. They were two sides of the same coin, each making the other stronger. And up next, you've got two more incredible stories waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this tale of tradition meeting modern challenges, you won't want to miss these stunning accounts of courage and dedication. Just click and discover more amazing true stories that will leave you speechless. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more extraordinary real-life stories that prove truth is more amazing than fiction. Until next time, keep watching for more incredible tales of bravery, honor, and the triumph of the human spirit.